We've had repeated reports and more than 30 different witnesses who have provided statements saying that the screening was non-existent, that there's no COVID screening, there was no security screening, that people were just being let in, bags weren't checked, people were smoking weed rampant throughout the concert, and that people were taking drugs. There was no management of that event whatsoever. It was pure and utter chaos.
Travis Scott and Drake are being sued for negligence over last Friday's deadly crowd crush at the Astroworld Festival in Houston. 8 people have died, dozens of others are injured. The lawsuit claims Drake helped incite the crowd alongside Scott, alleging, quote, Drake even continued to perform on the stage while the crowd mayhem continued.
The $1 million lawsuit was filed by a 23-year-old who claims to have suffered severe bodily injuries. Drake was a surprise guest here. Travis Scott was the headliner at a festival that drew in 50,000 people of all ages. Some of the victims were as young as 14 and 16 years old. To discuss these developments, let's bring in Andrew Fergueli with U of T's Faculty of Law and music commentator and publicist Eric Alper. We appreciate both of you making time for CP24 Tonight to talk about this. Andrew, when you look at this lawsuit, this $1 million lawsuit, what runs through your mind?
The first of many lawsuits to come, and a lawsuit coming in advance of potential criminal charges. I think there are going to be a lot of people, including families of those who have died, who are going to be suing the festival. I think this is just sort of the first drop in the bucket, so to speak.
So, Andrew, in your opinion, then, do people who attended that concert, who got hurt at the show or who witnessed horrific events, do they have a case?
Most likely, yes. And there are going to be a lot of factors that come into play here. And I should note that I would say the brunt of these lawsuits are probably going to be aimed at the organizers of the festival, because they're going to be asking what sort of duty of care did these organizers have, and what are the sorts of things they did to ensure that something like this didn't happen. And on your clip off the top, you heard some of the things that were announced that you would expect festival organizers to do, such as COVID screening, that you might not necessarily think of as relevant, but shows that they weren't necessarily doing the things that a careful and reasonable organizer would do. And that's going to also include how many exits there were, what kind of crowd control there was. There are going to be a lot of factors here that come into play in terms of the organizer's liability.
Eric, what is the significance then to have the headliner, Travis Scott, named in this lawsuit, and Drake?
Well, Travis Scott has had a number of years where he has been charged with inciting a riot, disorderly conduct. Back in 2015, he was charged at Lollapalooza, asking for the crowd to kind of break through the barricades to get closer to the venue. In 2017 in Arkansas, that's where he was arrested once again after performing at a show there. So the plaintiffs are going to take a look at things like his social media account and what was said on stage in order to prove that he was actually trying to cause chaos and, you know, bring up that rage, as he would call it, and that level of excitement that I think was too much to handle for the 50,000 people, and it could have been a lot worse. That venue can hold up to 200,000 people, and when you think about it, with the amount of festivals that go on, not just music, but religious festivals and sporting events around the world, it's astounding to me that this doesn't happen more often.
Eric, when you look at the video, and there is a lot of it on social media from the 50,000 people in attendance, was there anything that kind of raised a red flag to you? Did Travis Scott say anything that was perhaps alarming? There was one video where you can hear him say, someone's telling me to stop. Who's telling me to stop? So he's calling out to people in the audience.
Yeah, I think part of it is that, you know, although that the video is pretty damning truth for a lot of people, the fact is though that the Houston police and the organizers have made a number of decisions during that hour leading up to it. They knew that there were a lot of people. They knew that a lot of the barricades had been crushed through, that 10,000 people have reported to kind of crash through the gates without paying and bypassing any kind of central security system. So For the most part, though, I think what you have to try to do is take a look at what are the odds of something really bad happening like this versus stopping the show and potentially having 50,000 people start rioting over a canceled show and or trying to get through exits that weren't made for people to go quietly and efficiently halfway through an event like this.
Okay, so Andrew, the videos that were taken that Beatrice is referencing there, could that be part of a lawsuit, civil or criminal charges?
Oh, absolutely, they can be. But to sort of pick up on what Eric was saying, it's a lot tougher in these cases, both criminally and civilly, to hold the performer liable. You know, while Scott is saying in the video, someone's telling me to stop, it's not necessarily evidence that he knew what was going on. And that he understood that a crush where people were getting hurt was in fact happening, and the same goes for Drake. And so for those reasons, you're going to look a little bit more, there's going to be more fertile ground, both in the criminal part of this and in the civil part of this, to look at the organizers, how the festival was organized, how the rules were enforced, as opposed to the person up there in front of the 50,000 people, where without clear evidence of inciting something like this, it becomes harder to prove a case against them.
Does it, I guess, bear any weight that, as Eric was mentioning, Travis Scott has not only been accused of inciting violence in the past, but he's actually settled out of court and been essentially convicted for this past behavior?
Civilly, I think it sure does. I think it goes to show a pattern of negligence, or could. Criminally, it becomes a little bit more difficult because of the higher standard of proof and because of the general bar in criminal cases against past acts being relevant in your trial. But if the similarities are striking enough between what happened in the past at festivals that he's organized, he's headlined, and the current festival, then it would absolutely be potentially admissible and relevant against him.
Travis Scott says he will cover all the funeral costs for those killed in this incident. He's also partnered with BetterHelp to provide free therapy for those struggling in the aftermath. We're seeing posts on social media from people who attended Astroworld sharing their memories, what they're remembering from that, and it all sounds traumatic. Eric, this has happened before. When I saw the news on Friday and Saturday, I thought about Pearl Jam. Eddie Vedder was traumatized when 9 people died at a festival in Denmark where they were playing. You know, like you said, you're surprised it doesn't happen that often, but it has happened before, people dying in crowds.
Yeah, absolutely. The first one that I can remember in my lifetime was The Who, when 11 teenagers were trampled to death at Riverfront Stadium in Cincinnati, and that led to a statewide ban on festival seating, or better known as general admission. Things like this send shockwaves through the industry. You know, they want to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. But Travis Scott has, as you said, offered to take the first couple of steps. But this is far from over. You know, history is still being made with every action that he chooses to do, whether it's making statements or working with his publicity team in order to show remorse. But there's still a long ways to go. And you and everybody here knows that in America, where it gets very lawsuit happy, this could be in the hundreds of millions of dollars of liability once we're all said and done with this. And it could be years before these families see any money.
Eric, do you think this could change the way music festivals are planned and conducted? Could this be a scenario where they say no more mosh pits with 50,000 or up to 200,000 people? Everyone's got to have a seat to be at the concert.
I don't know. I would like to think that when something like this happened, there's some major changes. But the fact of the matter is that, you know, with Live Nation and AEG, the two biggest concert promoters in the world, they're pretty responsible when it comes to things like this. There's city ordinances, there's city laws, there's state laws with regard to having people there. It's really just a matter that money will always rule any industry. And as long as you can try to find ways to get 50,000 people to pay up to $300 a ticket, that's a lot of money in order to make sure that that maybe things don't happen again. And you know, I know around the world music fans are taking a look at this. Just, you know, they've gone through 2 years of not seeing a show, and all this pent up anger and energy might have had a good reason or a good cause for what went on. But the fact of the matter is we're dealing with a crisis right now in an industry that doesn't need one. They were the first ones to get shut down when COVID hit, and the music industry is going to be the last one to have festivals like this in the long run. So nobody wants this to happen again.
Absolutely. Eric, Andrew, we appreciate your insights. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
As Houston police continue to investigate the deadly crowd surge at Astroworld last Friday that killed 8 people and injured hundreds more, we are hearing from Drake in a statement he posted last night on social media, saying he has spent the last few days trying to wrap his mind around what happened. Drake is named alongside Travis Scott and Live Nation in a $1 million lawsuit filed by one festival goer. There are other lawsuits, and some anticipate criminal charges.
We have 2 guests joining us tonight to discuss what happened at Astroworld. The Houston bureau chief of the New York Times will be sharing what he's learned so far as the homicide investigation continues in Houston on the ground. But first, let's bring in Evan Pond. He's a 16-year-old from Simcoe, Ontario, who boarded a flight to Houston on his own to go to this first concert, the first in almost 2 years. Evan, thanks for being here on CP24 Tonight. I'm glad to see you because it means you're okay. You've made it home safe. But how are you doing?
It's definitely, it's definitely a recovery process. I mean, not only for me, but for a lot of the other people I've talked to, also at the festival.
Have you had time to process what happened at the festival?
Yeah, a little bit. It's like I said, though, it's definitely hard. A lot of us have talked with each other about what happened and kind of why it happened, as bad as it sounds, and what we can do kind of in the future to prevent this stuff from happening.
Do you feel traumatized, Evan?
I do, yeah.
What do you remember?
Well, one of the key things I'll always remember is I think it was two to three songs in, this girl turned to me and she asked me if she was going to die. And I just couldn't answer because I didn't want to give her false hope. Yeah.
What was happening in that moment, Evan, when she turned to you and said, "Am I going to die?" Help us understand what you and what she was going through at that point.
I think it was like pure fear and panic. With all the people behind us, like tens of thousands of people, and people falling to the ground. I remember a pile of people. I look behind me and there's a pile of people unconscious. I look to my right and there's people coughing up blood. I look to my left, there's people puking. So it's definitely fearful for everyone that wasn't.
Did this happen suddenly? I know, like, when you go to the festival, like the gates, you were there at 4 a.m., the gates open at 9 a.m. This is 12 hours later, right? I mean, did you see issues throughout the day, or was this sudden?
No, I definitely saw issues throughout the day. It was kind of little things, I'd say, like leading up. Like, for example, like I got there at 4 a.m., as you said. So when we all rushed the gates at 9 o'clock, I noticed security kind of just gave up, and I feel like that just set the tone for the rest of the festival weekend. And yeah, it was definitely scary. It's definitely scary to think with that many people, 50,000 in attendance, that security can just give up that easily.
What do you mean by that, Evan? What do you mean that security gave up, or it felt like they did?
I feel like a lot of the times they were just standing around, like it was almost like they were a part of the crowd.
Mm-hmm. There is some sort of expectation that everyone's just going to stay safe when you have so many people crowded together so close to the stage, right, Evan? How close were you to that stage?
I'd say I was within a couple of meters. I was on the left side of the stage. Before Travis's set, there was a previous set that came from the other stage. I was to the left of the main stage. So we had a bunch of people from that set come over and crowd in that area. So especially the left side was especially crowded.
Yeah, and we've heard now investigators saying that it seems like the pushing was coming from those sides, right? So when you're being pushed and being knocked down, was there anyone, or was there a feeling that people were trying to help each other?
There's definitely that sense of, like, I'd almost call it survival. It seemed like at the same time as we were trying to help each other, it seemed like it was every man for themselves, really. As bad as that sounds, I saw there's a bunch of people that went down. Some people weren't helping. Some people were trampling over them. Some others were grabbing hands. It was crazy, overwhelming.
At what point, Evan, did you feel like I'm going to be okay? I'm going to make it home to my family?
I can't say I felt that at all during the set.
Wow. And how are you now? How is your family?
I'm like I said, I'm still in recovery. I'm still recovering mentally. Physically, I'm not very damaged, but mentally, the scarring's definitely there, and trying to work my way through it.
Tell me about the moment, Evan, when you actually managed to get out of the perimeter of the park where this concert was being held. What were you feeling, knowing that you did manage to make it while you were watching ambulances and people being helped?
I felt very hopeful. I felt very grateful. Part of me, I was very overwhelmed. I kind of just thought to myself what just happened, because it seemed so surreal. And then I look to my right, I see like 15 to 20 ambulances rush in, and it was very overwhelming, very overwhelming.
Evan, I know you went back to the memorial site in the days that followed over the weekend. Tell me what that was like. Was it kind of cathartic to be there with other people who experienced the same thing as you?
Yeah, I'd almost say it's comfort and discomfort. As discomforting as the situation was, I felt very comfortable being surrounded with everyone who kind of experienced the same thing I did. There was a moment actually in the night where we all kind of just stood in a circle and talked about what happened, kind of reflected on everything. And it definitely feels nice to know that there's people there for you in such a time of despair.
Do you feel safe now? I mean, your family must be happy that you're home. Are you supported? Do you feel loved?
Yeah, definitely. The support I've gotten since I've been home, the texts and everything have just been great. I've been so grateful for everything, for sure.
Good. Well, we do wish you all the best, Evan. We appreciate you sharing these moments with us, and we hope that you get stronger sooner. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Well, we're glad that Evan Pond is okay. Let's turn to the Houston bureau chief of the New York Times now. J. David Goodman joins us live from Houston. When we think about the investigation, David, what is the latest here?
Well, this investigation, which got started, in the immediate aftermath of the tragedy here, is really focused on trying to establish a timeline of events there and to figure out, what it was that, motivated the crowd to move in the way that it did, and also what caused the deaths of the 8 young people who died. That's going to be key, because in order to understand, what happened, and especially for these lawsuits that have come out to assign blame, there needs to be some clarity about how it was that folks lost their lives, and we don't still know that, and that's a key thing in the investigation. And that's the medical examiner here says that could still take a few weeks, because they're going to need to do, toxicology to find out whether there had been any drugs that were taken or any other things that may have affected the people that died. And so, even though there's tons of reports, very credible reports from people in the in the event who watched people get trampled, I don't think we still know the extent to which that was the cause of each or every of these young people's deaths.
And you mentioned it, it's going to take some time. When you say timeline, walk us back to the beginning, because some of the details that you've reported on for the New York Times could certainly carry some weight in this police investigation, including the chief himself, who had some concerns.
Right. I mean, I think that's one of the most interesting and in some ways troubling aspects of this investigation is that people, up and down, officials up and down the sort of bureaucracy of Houston knew that this was going to be an event that would be difficult to control. And you saw that in 2019 when Travis Scott did the last Astroworld festival here. They had stampedes, and some people were injured, and it was nothing like what we saw on Friday. But it gave officials here enough pause that they added more police, they added more security, they beefed up the fencing, And none of that appears to have had any effect. As your guest was saying before, it's not as if all of this it was going smoothly and then all of a sudden at 9 p.m. when Travis Scott came on, it went off the rails. This was something that had been building throughout the day, and people that we spoke to talked about the gates being crashed right at 9 a.m., 10 a.m. when they first opened up to fans, and sort of continued throughout the day. You had fans that were overrunning the merchandise area. You had there's been reports. I spoke to someone today who said there were people on the roof at some point. And so you really had a scene of chaos, and you had people coming in for medical attention, in the early afternoon, so hours before this got off and got into the sort of deadly state that it went into later. The chief of police did go and visit Travis Scott in his trailer on Friday to tell him, in so many words, that he had concerns for public safety in the event, and to impart that on him. And I think that's an unusual turn of events for a concert, even one where the fans can get rowdy, to have the police chief visit. And I think what's complicated now is that the investigation, as it goes forward, is being conducted by that same organization, by that same police chief. And so I think, in what we've reported today, is there's lots of ties between Travis Scott and Houston. He's quite beloved by people in Houston, but also, there's a certain sort of mentor relationship that he had, that certain officials in Houston have for him. And I think that has at least caused some people to call for an independent investigation, one that doesn't involve the police department here.
No question, Travis Scott's seen as the hometown hero. Houston's mayor, David, saying that there was more security at Astroworld than there was at World Series games. What's your understanding of the scope of security, of medical professionals who were there and at the ready to take care of people? Was there enough?
I mean, I think that's something that they're going to have to that's the subject of the investigation. It seems as if they had enough for a normal event of that size. And I think they were not prepared at all for an event that was going to cause multiple cardiac arrests at the same time. And so even though you had the fire department staged around the event with ambulances, you didn't have them able to get to people in time. And we spoke to one of the medics who was hired by, one of the sort of third-party medics who was hired by the concert organizers. And he was saying that at a certain point, it would take 10 minutes to get through the crowd to someone who was in an extreme state, in cardiac arrest or something else, and that the fans were not being cooperative. They weren't able to get there, and there just wasn't any real communication that was going on, or at least good communication in the midst of it, to sort of let folks through. I mean, you saw there's video, of course, that everyone has seen of the ambulance that passed through the crowd, but it didn't seem, as you've seen from those videos, that that ambulance was that people helped those first responders get to where they needed to go. And so I think all of that is going to be an element of this investigation, whether they had enough police on hand. Clearly, people go to a concert, they want a little bit of freedom. They don't want it to be, penned up with police everywhere. But something, was not right in the way that this was organized. And I think that's what everyone is looking at right now.
There is still some confusion, right, David? There was a lot of confusion in the days after when you heard Houston police referring to a security guard being injected with something in his neck and blacking out. And now police are saying that they don't believe somebody was going around injecting people with drugs with a needle. Where does that stand? Is that true at all now?
Well, I think, as far as I understand it, there is some sense, at least there was a report that one person had been, stabbed with something that seemed to have some marks of an injection. Whether there was someone going around stabbing multiple people, I think we're pretty confident that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. It's one of these things that, because we're not inside there, we haven't seen all the video, we can't be 100% sure, but that early rumor seems to be completely just that it may have been born of this one report from one security guard saying, I think I was stabbed with something. They used Narcan on him. It seemed to have an effect, and therefore people kind of jumped to the conclusion that, yes, this person was stabbed with an opioid because this thing helped him, and it may just be a coincidence or something else. But I think the report said there was someone going around stabbing people with some sort of syringe, and that's what caused this. I think it's pretty much debunked by the reports from people who have been inside, your guest and others, that this was really an example of a crowd that kind of got out of control. I mean, it was like, I think the best metaphor is a wave. It was something that people felt like they could not control and get out of the way of, and they were stuck in the middle of and had to sort of ride out as best they could. And unfortunately, many people couldn't.
Mm-hmm. Final question, David. We appreciate your work and your time tonight. Is there conversations about the liability of these performers now as this criminal investigation continues?
I mean, I think certainly Travis Scott, this is his festival, and many of the lawsuits have named him directly, which is not a surprise. But I do think that there is certainly concern on the part of him and his team that he bears some potential liability here. I mean, he's hired a crisis communications firm to try and deal with this. I mean, it's definitely a moment where this is not what he wanted to have happen, of course, but now they're very much in a defensive posture because I think they do. There's a question of whether he ended the show and the promoters and the organizers ended the show early enough. And the police chief has said, they worried about riots happening, but I do think that's still an open question. That does go back to Travis Scott and his role in continuing to perform while people were dying in his crowd.
Okay. J. David Goodman, Houston bureau chief for the New York Times. We appreciate you making time for CP24 Tonight. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
The motivation for me joining was really moving here with my family as an immigrant. There was a very strong drive to really give back to Canada. What really stuck with me throughout my career and the driving factor that I'm taking with me now is really the character of men and women that I served with, that I encountered, that helped develop me and have left me with lifelong friendships.
That was the voice of Warrant Officer Ashan Correa, who retired just a few months ago in June after serving 18 years with the Canadian Army Reserve with the 48th Highlanders of Canada. He's just one of 53 veterans already featured as part of the Honor Country Sacrifice Project, which puts the spotlight on our men and women in uniform, both past and present. These photos you're looking at on your screen right now, all taken by photographer Trevor Godino, who joins us now live here on CP24 Tonight. Trevor, so good to have you here on the eve of Remembrance Day. Tell me about how this started. This is a real passion project for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it actually started because a few years ago I was volunteering with the Native Association of Canada, and we were photographing World War II vets at the RCMI. And the stories I was hearing from these people were like really cool stories that you never learned in like textbooks. And then as an immigrant myself, I'm like, there was something that was missing. And I started digging deeper into the stories I was hearing. And I was like, there were so many groups of people, women, people from the LGBTQ community, the indigenous community, blacks and Indians and Asians that are totally excluded from history. So this was a way of me to create an exhibition that shows portraits of everyone that served from World War II to the modern era. And also it's a way for the public to relate with people that they could relate to and see themselves in. I think Remembrance Day has turned into a one-day thing. I think it should be an all-year thing. And I hope that's the impact I'm hoping these images will actually create in society.
You know, I've had a look at some of these images, and we're showing them to our viewers again on the screen right now. These are people from all walks of life, young and old. The warrant officer you heard from off the top, he spoke about being an immigrant and how that inspired his journey into joining the Canadian Armed Forces. Why was it so important to you, Trevor, to have this diversity element? As you mentioned, people from the LGBT community, Indigenous, Black people. Why was that so pivotal?
I don't want to say that I'm one of those communities that were underserved, because I came here in '89 from the Middle East, but I'm of Indian descent. And I just felt like for us to be able to hold on to something which is like the military, you normally don't see the images of people like us. So I felt it was very important for all these groups to have their heroes, someone to look up to. A woman I photographed in BC last Remembrance, a little bit before Remembrance Day, she mentioned to me that a little girl stopped her in her first parade for Remembrance Day and said, "You remind me of myself, and I want to be you when I grow up." And both of them came from Asian heritage. And for communities to have someone they could hold on to within the institution of CAF, I think that's very important, because it leads for these communities to also support these individuals once they retire. I think it's great that we celebrate Remembrance Day, but I think we need to do a little bit more for the people that serve.
If you can see it, you can be it, right, Trevor?
Yeah,
tell me
exactly.
about what you see when you're looking through your lens at some of these veterans. You must see more than just their uniforms and their medals.
Some of the people I've photographed, when you hear their story, it's like, oh my God, stoic. Then you meet them in person and they're joking, they're jovial, and then you just kind of have to remember, yes, they're soldiers and they've seen some really intense situations that we may never ever get to see, thankfully, but they're human beings. And I think one of the things I want to focus on this project is also capturing the human element of that. Yes, to remember their service, but also remember they are just like everyone Canadians who made that choice to serve.
Who chooses, Trevor, if they're photographed in their uniforms with their medals or if they're, wearing plaid in their everyday civilian clothes?
So we have a discussion. Ever since the project started, I've been getting an influx of emails saying, hey, so-and-so has served, a family member served, my entire family. There's some families, the entire family has served or are serving. And then we discuss how I artistically want to photograph them, as well as what within the CAF regulations to photographing a veteran or an active soldier is. So there are rules to photographing these individuals.
I know you've already photographed 53 of them, but you want to go far beyond that to 400 across the country, coast to coast to coast plus. What is the plan? What is the goal? And what are you going to do with all these photos, Trevor, when you've got them?
So I'm gonna put it out there to the universe right now. So I'm hoping I'll have a really great public venue sponsor that has multiple venues across the country that we could actually take these images, make them large, like almost life size, and then have QR codes attached to it, so you could actually, as you walk through the space, you could scan the image and hear the actual person speak to you and tell you their story. That's the end goal, is to take all these images and have a national-wide exhibit that opens simultaneously in every province. And after that, so the pictures don't collect dust, put together a book with all the money going back to the veterans.
Amazing, Trevor. You're doing great stuff, great photos. And on your website, too, if people want to hear their voices, you've actually got some more voice audio clips from these vets sharing a bit about who they are, where they served, and how they actually ended up in the Canadian Armed Forces. Thanks so much for doing this. Thanks for talking to us. And thanks for paying tribute to our men and women in uniform, Trevor.
It's an honor for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, you know that sweet, smooth voice you just heard at the end there. You're listening to multi-platinum selling artist Tyler Shaw singing Oh Holy Night along with the Tenors. The Juno Award nominated singer just released a new holiday album. It's called A Tyler Shaw Christmas, and he's kicking off a cross-Canada tour with the Tenors later this month. The Vancouver-born singer is also headlining the upcoming Niagara Falls Music Live, a week-long celebration of music happening between Christmas and New Year's. And we welcome to CP24 Tonight, Tyler Shaw. Good evening, Tyler. How are you?
Great. How are you?
I'm well. I feel like you should have named your album Merry Shawmiss. I think that was a missed opportunity.
That's a good one. How about you name my next Christmas album?
There you go. You're on. So let's talk about that first. Let's start with it. You've got your new album. It is out. What's that creative process been like in COVID times, especially?
COVID times is one thing. Definitely had to set up a home studio area to get creative. Not only that, but a Christmas album, for those of you who are not in the music industry, you have to start pretty early. So I've been doing Christmas music since July of 2021. So it's been a long time of Christmas spirit in this household.
How do you get into the Christmas mood in July, Tyler? Tell us about that.
Right? Yeah. Turn the AC really high, I turn the LED lights to red and green. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, but it's a mindset thing. So obviously listening to Christmas music with headphones so I don't annoy anybody, and just try to get into the spirit that way.
Awesome. I know you're going on tour with the Tenors. You'll be performing at Massey Hall. Tell me about what you're looking forward to, and what do you think it's going to be like getting in front of a live audience again?
I cannot wait to perform for live audiences. Honestly, it's been so long, obviously, because of the pandemic, and we're finally able to do that. But in this capacity, like Massey Hall is an iconic venue, and I'm so excited to share the stage with the Tenors. We have 2 nights, December 22nd and December 23rd, which I'm very much looking forward to. You saw the video of Oh Holy Night of us recording in the studio. That was so much fun, so I can just picture all the fun we're going to have on the road together.
Tell me about what COVID has been like for you, Tyler. A lot of the artists, performers that I've been talking to through the last 20 months tell me it's kind of been like an existential crisis without being there performing in stage, hearing feedback from the audience right away, without having that opportunity to have that interaction. It's kind of been like, who am I again? What's it been like for you?
Absolutely. Can definitely relate to that. The audience is super important in a live music venue or live music setting, because they tell you how the song is doing. Really, they love it, they hear it, all that. But in terms of personally, creatively, it was a shift. It was a hard shift to make. Going from traveling everywhere, where I usually get my inspiration is through traveling. So being at home, obviously that was a big shift for me, but I was fortunate enough to be able to just spend some time with myself, spend some time with my family, and really get to understand what I wanted to do in the creative process for the Christmas album and for my 3rd studio album, which came out in August.
Awesome. Let's talk about this big music festival happening in Niagara Falls between Christmas and New Year's. Tickets, they go on sale tomorrow, and you're performing on December 29th.
Yeah, I'm stoked. Honestly, this is all just a bunch of live music that's going to be happening for me in the next 2 months. And to kind of cap off the year of 2021 is the Niagara Music Week Festival. So very much looking forward to it. I don't think I've ever done a show in Niagara, now that I come to think about it. So I'm pumped to see what the audience there has to offer in terms of energy and vibe. And yeah, very much looking forward to it.
You've been to the Falls, though, right? That's on the
Yes.
must list.
Yes, I have been to the Falls.
Okay. I want to also ask you about the Chum Christmas Wish. You're going to be here on CP24 tomorrow. What's it like taking part in that, and why do you do it?
I was thinking about this the other day, actually, and I recently had a daughter. She's 10 months old, and she'll be 1 in December. And I just can't imagine a Christmas without toys for children, plain and simple. It's, as you get older, you kind of understand more meaning behind Christmas, family time, religion, or whatever your traditions are. But as a kid, toys are make you happy in a way. You know what I mean? You don't understand the depth that Christmas goes. You're just like presents and toys and all that. So I can't imagine my daughter waking up, she might not know what's going on this year because she's turning 1, but, in a few years and being like, why didn't I get any toys? That's heartbreaking for me. So this is, it kind of brought new lights to the situation. So I'm really happy to be a part of it.
For sure, a worthy cause, making sure that every child has a Christmas. What do you get a 1-year-old for Christmas, Tyler?
You tell me.
I don't have one, so I can't even help you with that.
Strapped for ideas. Rocking horse, maybe. I don't know.
I know you and your wife, as you've been talking about, you welcomed Everly to your life. You had a pandemic baby. What's it been like kind of being in a cocoon with her during this pandemic?
Yeah, you know what? It could not have come at a better time for me personally. Being an artist, being on the road a lot, it definitely takes a toll on personal life. So being able to be here at home throughout my entire wife's pregnancy and basically the entire first year of my daughter's life has been such a blessing. And I'm very, very grateful for that, because it could have gone a lot differently. I could have missed a lot of firsts.
And just quickly, Tyler, we've only got a couple seconds left. You actually wrote one of the songs on your album, Christmas in Your Eyes, for Everly. Why was that important to you?
I wanted to basically remind people that Christmas is still special even though you're an adult. Imagine seeing Christmas through a child's eyes, the warmth, the comfort, the excitement, plain and simple like that.
And I'm sure you'll bring it all this year for her. Tyler Shaw, thanks so much for your time. Let's take Holy Night back to break now.